Hello and welcome back to another episode of My Journey to FIRE, which stands for Financial Independence and Retire Early. One of my long-term goals in life is to earn enough passive income to fund a good lifestyle without the need for a 9-to-5 job. So in this video series, I'll be talking about how I invest my money to generate different streams of passive income, including stocks and shares, rental income, savings interest, and more. It's fair to say that in August, shit hit the fan in the economy, causing mine and millions of other investors' shares to plummet. And while some investors got spooked and decided to sell off a load of their shares, this gave other investors like myself a great opportunity to buy shares at a discounted price. And whilst there is still some shit dripping off the metaphorical fan and stuck to the proverbial walls of this analogy, it's good to see that the economy has got out its wet wipes and it's started to make a slow but steady recovery. So if you want to see how I generate different sources of passive income and want to join me on this journey to FIRE, then just click subscribe. First up, we're going to take a look at the dividends I received in my stocks and shares ISA portfolio this month. So in August, I received an absolute whopping £4.54 total. £3.14 of this came from Novo Nordisk, which is a pharmaceutical company, and £1.43 of this came from Fundsmith Equity, which is a fund using a long-term strategy focusing on global investments. Unlike 60 years ago, where a monthly dividend of £4.50 would have allowed me to quit my job, buy a house and put my kids through college, £4.50 today, as we all know, is fuck all. I hold 21 different stocks, shares and bonds in my stocks and shares ISA portfolio, but it just so happens that in August, the only two companies paying a dividend were ones with a very low yield. In fact, you can see from this graph how much I've been paid in dividends every month for this calendar year, with the average being £235.53 per month. And whilst August's dividends were quite disappointing, I've had a look at next month's dividends and they are looking big. In fact, I'm likely to hear a thud when they land in my account. So this brings my total dividends for this year to around £1,900. I also find it quite useful to track my passive income progress by comparing the dividends to previous years. As you can see from the graph, my dividends have increased by an average of 34% per year when looking at dividends from January to August. If you've seen previous videos of this series, you'll know that I want to try and max out my stocks and shares ISA every year with the full 20 grand. To do this, I try and put £2,000 in every month. Given that there are 12 months in a year, this gives me a 2-month contingency in case there are some months where my spending or expenses are higher and I need to put the money aside for something else. And August started off the same as any other month and I put the £2,000 straight into the ISA. As I also had a spare bit of cash in the ISA anyway, I decided to make the following investments. I put £500 into a defence ETF that I've steadily been drip feeding my money into for some time now. £900 went into an all-world tracker fund. Again, this is one that I've been steadily adding to over time. And lastly, I bought £1,000 worth of shares in Fundsmith Equity, the company I mentioned earlier that paid me a very generous £1.43 in dividends. And that, as I thought at the time, was going to be it for the month. Then a couple of days later, I wake up to find that my portfolio has dropped about 5% or £5,000 in value overnight. That £100,000 milestone that I'd spent so long getting to had just slipped through my fingers and I was down to 95k. Like the experienced investor that I am, my first thought was, shit. In a nutshell, this was caused by several interconnected factors such as an interest rate hike in Japan, fears of a recession in the USA, and geopolitical tensions in the Middle East. Then once a few people decide to sell their shares, the floodgates open, other people follow suit and share prices absolutely drop off a cliff. But experience in investing has taught me that what comes up must come down and what goes down usually comes back up. I decided that there was no time like the present to heed my own advice, so I decided to whack in another £4,000 into my ISA. £2,000 went into my FTSE 100 tracker and £2,000 went into my S&P 500 index tracker. Thankfully, by the end of the month, there had been a near full recovery. And with the extra £4,000 that I invested, my shares were up between somewhere to £105,000 to £106,000. To me, I think this shows that I probably made the right decision. So currently my stocks and shares ISA portfolio consists of the following funds, bonds and stocks. You can also see in this pie chart the relative weightings of each holding in my portfolio based on their value. And considering the value of my stocks and shares ISA at the end of July was 99.5 grand and at the end of August was 105.5 grand, this value change is about 6 grand, so pretty much exactly what I invested. And considering there was a financial crash right in the middle of that, and I'm no worse for wear, I feel I can relax a little bit now. And I think for me, this is another crucial reminder that in investing, there are good days and bad days, but if you trust the process, you can make the best out of a bad situation. So not including the money that I've invested myself, the value of my stocks and shares ISA portfolio has gone up by about £8,200 since January, which is about 10.7%. For reference, the average annual return of a stocks and shares ISA over the past 10 years has been 9.6%. And considering we're only 8 months into the year, I'm pretty happy with this progress. In terms of property, I own a 2-bed, 1-bathroom flat in the East Midlands of the UK. I lived there myself for about 3 years, but when I had to change job and move to London, I decided to keep it and just rent it out. I rent it out for £1,275, but after property management costs, this comes to £1,144. If I decided not to use a property management company, I could save myself another £130. But considering that I'm a lazy bastard and I can't be bothered finding new tenants or dealing with all that legal shit, I think it's a pretty good payoff. I mean, I genuinely don't have to lift a finger. They do everything. It's brilliant. Anyway, this month's income was a little bit lower than normal and it came in at £1,038. This was because I still had to pay off a little bit of this selective licensing agreement fee. If you saw last month's episode, you'll know what this is and you'll know how much it pissed me off because I basically got robbed by the council. Here's a fairly accurate representation of my reaction when I found out I had to pay £800 to the council for no good reason. What the f*** are these Stephen doing, stealing all my money? I can't believe this. They're all about stupid. Literally don't want to go around. They need to take a look in the mirror. Anyway, this brings my total rental income for this calendar year to around £7,800. This money is all after expenses but before tax, so unlike the money in my stocks and shares ISA, I will have to pay tax on this income. Last up, we have interest. Personally, I have an instant access savings account with Zopa, which is now paying me 4.3% per year. Used to be 4.54, but it's gone down a little bit. At the start of this month, I had around £20,000 in this savings account, which means that I was paid £71 in interest. This brings my total interest on instant access savings accounts this calendar year to about £392. And in addition to my instant access savings accounts, I've also had a couple of 12-month fixed term savings accounts. The first one expired in January and I was paid £640. And then the second one expired in July and it paid out around £600. This brings my total interest from all savings accounts to around £1,600 this year. And once again, because all of this money is just kept in standard savings accounts, I will have to pay tax on any interest that I receive. That being said, if my money was in a cash ISA instead, I wouldn't have to pay any tax at all because it's in an ISA. But as I mentioned before, I'm looking to max out my stocks and shares ISA instead, and there's a £20,000 limit across all ISAs. So to summarise, this year I've received £1,884.23 in dividends, £7,762.97 in rental income, and £1,632.18 in money from interest in savings accounts. This comes to a grand total of £11,279.38 in passive income since January. If you also account for the £8,281 in capital gains from my stocks and shares ISA, this would bring my passive income for this calendar year up to £19,560.38. So these are all of my current sources of passive income. But one of my long-term goals is to start earning money from YouTube too. To do this, you need 1,000 subscribers. So if you found this video insightful, interesting, want to join me on my journey to FIRE, or just want to do me a favor, then just hit subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.